I never thought a charity gala would turn my entire life upside down. One minute, I was hiding behind a champagne flute, trying not to spill anything on my borrowed dress. The next, one of the most powerful men in the city was calling me his fiancée in front of 500 people. Dr. Adrian Cole didn't ask. He didn't warn me. He just locked eyes with me across that ballroom and made a choice that would bind us together in ways neither of us saw coming. If you want to know how a lie became the most dangerous truth I ever lived, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Grand Metropolitan Opera House glittered like something out of a dream I had no business being inside. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from vaulted ceilings, casting warm light over women in gowns that cost more than my entire year's tuition, and men in custom tuxedos who moved through the crowd like they owned the air itself. I stood near the back wall, clutching a silver tray of champagne flutes, trying to make myself invisible. I wasn't supposed to be visible anyway. I was part of the background, the help, just a part-time assistant covering for a friend who'd called in sick at the last minute. The event coordinator had shoved the tray into my hands 20 minutes ago with a curt nod and a warning not to make eye contact with anyone important. So naturally, I made eye contact with him. Dr. Adrian Cole stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a small circle of people who leaned in when he spoke and laughed a beat too late, like they were waiting for permission. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered in a way that made his perfectly tailored black suit look almost dangerous. Dark hair, sharp jawline, the kind of face that belonged on the cover of a business magazine with a headline like "The Surgeon Who Built an Empire." But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Gray, calculating, the eyes of someone who saw through everything and forgave nothing. I looked away fast, heat flooding my cheeks. The last thing I needed was to draw attention. "Excuse me, sweetheart." The voice came from my left, smooth, amused, dripping with the kind of condescension that made my skin crawl. I turned to find a man in his 50s, red-faced and grinning, a champagne glass already dangling from his thick fingers. His eyes traveled down my body in a way that made me want to disappear into the floor. "Yes, sir?" I kept my voice steady, professional. "You look a little lost." He stepped closer, his breath heavy with alcohol. "Not used to being around people like us, are you?" I forced a polite smile. "I'm just here to help with the event." Right. He waved a hand dismissively. "But you're not really from this world, are you? I can always tell. It's the shoes." I glanced down at my scuffed black flats, the only pair I owned that didn't have holes in the soles. My stomach twisted. "Don't worry," he continued, his grin widening. "It's charming, in a way, like bringing a stray kitten to a dog show." Someone nearby laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that made my face burn. I opened my mouth, not sure what I was going to say, when another voice cut through the noise. "Careful, Richard." The man's grin faltered. I turned, and there he was, Dr. Adrian Cole, standing just a few feet away, his gray eyes locked on the older man like a surgeon sizing up a tumor. "Adrian." Richard's voice lost its smugness instantly. You were just embarrassing yourself." Adrian's tone was calm, almost bored, but there was steel underneath. "And her." Richard's face went from red to purple. "I didn't mean, you never do." Adrian shifted his gaze to me, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. "Are you all right?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm fine." "Good." He didn't look away. "What's your name?" "Lily," I managed. "Lily Harper." "Lily." He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. Then he did something that stopped every conversation within 10 feet of us. He smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile I'd seen him give the other guests. This was something else, softer, almost surprised, like he'd just remembered how. "Actually," Adrian said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by the people watching us, "I should introduce you properly." My heart slammed against my ribs. What?" "Lily is my fiancée." The words landed like a grenade in the middle of the ballroom. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Someone dropped a glass, and the sound of it shattering was the only noise for 3 full seconds. I stared at him, my mouth open, my brain scrambling to make sense of what he'd just said. "Fiancé. Fiancé." Richard looked like he'd been slapped. Wait, you're engaged?" Yes. Adrian's expression didn't change. He extended a hand toward me, palm up, and I realized with a jolt of panic that everyone was watching, waiting. Isn't that right, Lily? I should have said no. I should have laughed it off, apologized, backed away before this insane moment spiraled any further. But something in his eyes stopped me. A flicker of something I couldn't quite name. A challenge, maybe. Or a test. I set the tray down on the nearest table and placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and steady, and the room erupted into a low hum of whispers. Adrian pulled me closer, just enough that I could smell his cologne, clean, expensive, understated. He leaned down slightly, his voice dropping to a murmur only I could hear. "Play along," he said. "Just for tonight." I didn't understand. I didn't understand any of this, but I nodded anyway, because the alternative was standing there like an idiot while 500 people stared at me, and that felt worse. Adrian straightened, his hand still holding mine, and turned back to Richard with that same cool, detached expression. "I trust that clears things up." Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Yes, of course. Congratulations." "Thank you." Adrian's tone made it clear the conversation was over. He guided me away from the crowd, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, and I felt the weight of 100 eyes following us as we moved toward the far side of the ballroom. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed once we were out of earshot. "Saving you from a very unpleasant conversation," Adrian replied calmly. "You're welcome." "I didn't ask you to." "No, but you were about to cry." He glanced down at me, his expression unreadable. "And I don't tolerate men like Richard." I swallowed hard, my pulse still racing. "So you just told everyone I'm your fiancé?" "Yes." "Why?" He paused, and for the first time since this nightmare started, he looked almost uncertain. "I don't know." We stood there in silence, the music swelling around us, and I realized with a sinking feeling that whatever this was, whatever bizarre, impulsive decision he'd just made, it wasn't going to end when the gala did. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Adrian kept me close, his hand never leaving mine, introducing me to people whose names I forgot the moment they walked away. Senators, CEOs, philanthropists, everyone smiled and congratulated us, their eyes sharp with curiosity and something that looked a lot like calculation. I smiled back, nodded, played the part because I didn't know what else to do. By the time the event started winding down, my face hurt from holding the same fake expression for 2 hours straight. Adrian led me toward a quieter corner near the coat check, finally releasing my hand. I flexed my fingers, my skin still tingling where his had been. "We need to talk," he said. "No kidding." He studied me for a moment, his gray eyes unreadable. "How much do you know about me?" "Enough." I crossed my arms, suddenly exhausted. "You're Dr. Adrian Cole, neurosurgeon, billionaire, single father. You don't do interviews, you don't date publicly, and you definitely don't randomly claim waitresses as your fiancée." "Assistant," he corrected. "What?" "You said waitress. You're an assistant." I was holding a tray of champagne. "Semantics." He tilted his head slightly. "You've done your research. You're kind of hard to miss." I let out a shaky breath. "Look, I get that you were trying to help back there, but this is insane. You can't just—" "I can." His voice was calm, matter of fact. "And I did." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because Richard Lawson is a predator who preys on young women at these events, and I'm tired of watching people like him get away with it." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And because the alternative was worse." "What alternative?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the ballroom, where a group of older women in expensive jewelry were watching us with barely concealed interest. "There are people here tonight who have been trying to arrange a marriage for me for the past year. Powerful families who see my daughter and my wealth as an opportunity." My stomach sank. "So you used me as a shield?" "Yes." At least he was honest. I rubbed my temples, trying to process everything. "Okay, so what now? You'll tell everyone it was a mistake, right? A misunderstanding?" "No." I blinked. "No?" "If I retract the statement now, it looks impulsive, weak." Adrian's expression hardened. "I don't do weak." So you're just going to keep pretending I'm your fiancée? Not pretending. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, holding it out to me. I'm offering you a contract. I took the card numbly, staring at the embossed lettering. Adrian Cole, MD, private practice. A phone number. An address in one of the most expensive parts of the city. A contract, I repeated slowly. Yes, you'll act as my partner in public, attend events, be seen with me, help maintain the image of a stable, committed relationship. His tone was clinical, like he was outlining a surgical procedure. In return, I'll cover your tuition, living expenses, and any medical costs for your family. My breath caught. How do you... I looked into you while you were talking to the mayor's wife, Adrian said simply. Your mother has stage 3 breast cancer. Your father works 2 jobs to cover the bills. You're putting yourself through art school on scholarships and side gigs like this one. He paused. You need help. I need a solution. This benefits both of us. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. You had me investigated in 2 hours? 90 minutes, actually. That's... I broke off, my hands shaking. That's insane. It's efficient. He tilted his head slightly. You're in a difficult position, Lily. I'm offering you a way out. All you have to do is sign. I looked down at the card, then back up at him. His expression was calm, detached, like he was discussing a business merger instead of asking me to fake an entire relationship. And the worst part was, he was right. I did need help. My mom's treatments were draining every cent we had. My dad was working himself into an early grave. I was barely keeping my head above water, juggling classes and rent and the constant crushing weight of bills I couldn't pay. This man, this stranger, was offering me a lifeline. But at what cost? There are rules, Adrian continued, as if sensing my hesitation. No emotional attachment. This is a professional arrangement, nothing more. We maintain appearances in public, but our private lives remain separate. When the contract ends, likely in a year or two, once the pressure from certain families subsides, we part ways amicably. Clean break. And your daughter? I asked quietly. What does she think about all this? For the first time, something shifted in his expression. She doesn't need to know the details. As far as she's concerned, we're simply together. You're going to lie to your own kid? I'm going to protect her, Adrian said sharply. From opportunists. From people who see her as leverage, from the kind of chaos that comes with being in my position. His voice softened just slightly. She's 7 years old. She deserves stability. I bit my lip, my mind racing. This was wrong. It was crazy, manipulative, probably a dozen other things I couldn't even name. But when I thought about my mom lying in that hospital bed, about my dad's hollow eyes every time another bill arrived. How much time do I have to decide? I asked. 24 hours. Adrian pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. I'll send a car for you tomorrow evening. We can finalize the details then. And if I say no? He met my eyes, and for just a moment I thought I saw something human underneath all that ice. Then I'll respect your decision. But the offer won't come again. I nodded slowly, clutching the card like a lifeline. Okay? Okay. Adrian stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. Someone will be in touch. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never been there at all. I stood there alone, my heart pounding, the card burning a hole in my hand. What the hell had I just agreed to? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my tiny studio apartment staring at Adrian Cole's business card, turning it over and over in my hands until the edges started to fray. My phone buzzed twice, texts from my roommate asking how the gala went, but I didn't answer. How could I? How could I explain that I'd just been offered a contract to fake date a billionaire neurosurgeon in exchange for enough money to save my family? It sounded insane even in my own head. Around 3 a.m, I finally gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. I typed Adrian's name into the search bar and spent the next 2 hours falling down a rabbit hole of articles, interviews, and society page photos. Dr. Adrian Cole. Graduated top of his class from Johns Hopkins. Built a private neurosurgery practice that catered exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. Net worth estimated somewhere north of $2 billion. No scandals, no messy divorces, no public relationships at all. Just a pristine reputation and a daughter named Sophie, whose face appeared in exactly 3 photos online, all of them carefully cropped to hide her features. He was a ghost. A man who existed in headlines and charity galas, but never let anyone close enough to see the real him. And now he wanted me to stand beside him and pretend I knew him better than anyone. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. A car will arrive at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Wear something comfortable. AC. I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. He didn't even sign his full name, just initials, like I was supposed to already know who he was, like we were already familiar. I typed out a response 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Finally, I just sent back a single word. Okay. The reply came instantly. Good. The car that arrived the next evening was sleek, black, and so expensive looking that my neighbors actually stopped to stare as I climbed into the back seat. The driver, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform, didn't say a word, just nodded politely and pulled away from the curb. I smoothed down my dress, a simple navy blue thing I'd borrowed from my roommate, and tried not to think about how out of place I felt. The car smelled like leather and something faintly floral, and the seats were so soft I felt like I was sinking into a cloud. We drove for 20 minutes, winding through the city until we reached a neighborhood I'd only ever seen in magazines. Massive houses set back from the street, gates and hedges, and the kind of quiet that only money could buy. The car turned into a long driveway and stopped in front of a sprawling modern mansion, all glass and clean lines and lights that glowed warm against the twilight. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out onto smooth stone pavement, my flats clicking softly. Before I could second-guess myself, the front door opened. Adrian stood in the doorway, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look even more intense. He looked different without the tuxedo, less untouchable, more human, but his expression was still unreadable. "Lily!" He stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. "Come in." I walked past him into a foyer that could have fit my entire apartment twice over. Marble floors, high ceilings, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than my college tuition. Everything was pristine, controlled, perfect. Just like him. "This way," Adrian said, leading me down a hallway into a large living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a garden lit by soft landscape lighting. A leather couch sat in front of a fireplace that crackled with real flames. It was beautiful. It was cold. "Nice place," I said, because I had to say something. "Thank you." He gestured to the couch. "Sit. Would you like something to drink?" "Water's fine." He disappeared for a moment, returning with 2 glasses. He handed me one and sat across from me, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Watching, evaluating. "So," I said, taking a sip, "are we doing this?" "That depends on you." Adrian leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "I meant what I said last night. This is a professional arrangement. I need someone I can trust to play a role, and you need financial security. It's transactional." "Transactional," I echoed. The word tasted bitter. "Yes." He didn't flinch. "I won't lie to you, Lily. I don't do relationships. I don't do emotional entanglements. What I'm offering is a partnership based on mutual benefit and clear boundaries." "And what happens when people start asking questions?" I asked. "When they want to know how we met, how long we've been together, why you never mentioned me before? We'll create a story." Adrian pulled a folder from the side table and set it between us. Simple, believable, easy to remember. "We met at a hospital benefit 6 months ago. You were volunteering. I asked you out. We kept it private because I don't like media attention." I opened the folder and found a neatly typed document, pages of details, timelines, fabricated memories. It was thorough, disturbingly thorough. "You really thought this through," I murmured. "I don't do anything halfway." I looked up at him, searching his face for some hint of doubt, some crack in the armor. But there was nothing, just that same calm, controlled exterior. "What about your daughter?" I asked. "Sophie, what do I tell her?" Adrian's expression tightened just for a second. "You'll meet her tomorrow. She's sensitive. She doesn't make friends easily, but she needs stability, and right now, you're part of that." "Does she know this isn't real?" "She knows what she needs to know." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. "The contract is straightforward. 1 year, renewable if necessary. You'll move into the guest wing here, separate space, your own privacy. In public, we're a couple. In private, we're colleagues. No physical relationship unless absolutely necessary for appearances. Absolutely necessary, I repeated. Like what? Holding hands, a kiss on the cheek. Nothing more. His eyes locked on mine. Unless you're uncomfortable with that. I should have been. I should have stood up, walked out, told him to find someone else for his twisted little arrangement. But instead, I thought about my mom's hospital bills, my dad's exhausted face, the scholarship letter that said I was 1 semester away from losing everything. I'm not uncomfortable, I said quietly. Adrian nodded. Then we have an agreement. He pulled out a pen and slid the contract across the table. I picked it up, scanning the dense legal language, the clauses about confidentiality and compensation and termination. It was real. This was actually happening. I signed my name at the bottom, my hand shaking just slightly. Adrian took the contract, signed his own name with quick practice strokes, and tucked it back into the folder. Welcome to the arrangement, Lily Harper. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. What have I just gotten myself into? Something that will change both of our lives, Adrian said, for better or worse. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, and I realized with a cold sinking feeling in my chest that I'd just sold myself into something I didn't fully understand. But it was too late to turn back now. The morning came too fast. I woke up in a bedroom 3 times the size of my entire apartment, tangled in sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent. For a few disoriented seconds, I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back, the contract, the signature, the cold certainty in Adrian's eyes when he'd said this was just business. I sat up slowly, taking in the guest wing he'd mentioned. Cream-colored walls, minimalist furniture, a window overlooking the garden that let in soft morning light. Everything was tasteful, expensive, and completely impersonal, like a luxury hotel room designed by someone who'd never actually felt comfortable anywhere. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Breakfast at 8. Sophie will be joining us. Dress casually. C. I checked the time, 7:30. 30 minutes to pull myself together and meet the 7-year-old girl whose father I was now contractually obligated to pretend to love. No pressure. I showered quickly in the marble bathroom, dried my hair with a towel that was somehow both impossibly soft and perfectly white, and pulled on jeans and a sweater from the small bag I'd packed last night. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Same face, same body, but standing in this pristine space wearing borrowed confidence like a costume. This was going to be a disaster. I found my way downstairs by following the smell of coffee and something sweet baking. The kitchen was massive, all granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, but somehow it felt warmer than the rest of the house. Maybe because of the small girl sitting at the island, swinging her legs and coloring in a book with intense concentration. Sophie. She had Adrian's dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and the same serious expression he wore when he was thinking. But her eyes were different, lighter, softer, the kind of brown that caught the light and turned amber. She wore pajamas covered in cartoon cats and had a smudge of what looked like marker on her cheek. Adrian stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with surprising competence. He'd traded the sweater for a plain white t-shirt and jeans, and he looked almost normal. Almost. Good morning, I said quietly. Sophie's head snapped up. She studied me with the kind of unfiltered curiosity only kids could pull off, her marker hovering above the page. You're Lily, she said. Not a question, a statement. I am. I smiled, moving closer. And you're Sophie. Daddy said you were coming to live with us. Sophie tilted her head. Are you his girlfriend? I glanced at Adrian. He didn't turn around, just kept flipping pancakes like this was a totally normal conversation. Something like that, I said carefully. Okay. Sophie went back to coloring, apparently satisfied. Do you like cats? I love cats. Good. I have 3. Well, they're not real. They're stuffed. But I pretend they're real. She held up her coloring book, showing me a page filled with elaborate cat drawings. This one's Princess Whiskers. She's the queen. She looks very royal, I said, and I meant it. The kid had talent. Adrian finally turned around, sliding a plate of pancakes onto the counter. Breakfast is ready. We ate in a silence that wasn't quite comfortable, but wasn't hostile either. Sophie chattered between bites, mostly about her stuffed cats and a kid at school who'd stolen her purple crayon. Adrian listened, occasionally interjecting with a quiet comment or question, and I watched the two of them together with a strange ache in my chest. This was what he was protecting, not his reputation, not his money. This small, serious girl who colored cats and swung her legs and trusted her father completely. And I was lying to her. "Lily," Sophie's voice pulled me back. "Can you draw?" "A little," I admitted. "I'm studying art." Her eyes went wide. "Really? Like painting and stuff?" "Painting, sketching, sculpture, all of it." "That's so cool." Sophie pushed her coloring book toward me. "Can you draw Princess Whiskers, but like really good?" I picked up a marker and started sketching, feeling Adrian's gaze on me the whole time. When I finished, Sophie gasped, "That's amazing! Daddy, look!" Adrian leaned over, studying the drawing with the same focused intensity he probably used when examining brain scans. "It's very good." "It's perfect," Sophie's corrected. She looked up at me with something close to awe. "You're really good at this." "Thank you," I said softly. Sophie grinned, and for the first time since I'd walked into this house, I felt like maybe, just maybe, this insane arrangement might not be a complete disaster. Then Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening. "I have to take this. Sophie, finish your breakfast." He disappeared into the hallway, and I was left alone with a 7-year-old who was now peppering me with questions about art school and whether I knew how to draw dragons. I answered as best I could, trying not to think about the fact that this little girl was already getting attached to someone who'd be gone in a year. Someone who was only here because her father had signed a check. Adrian returned a few minutes later, his jaw set in a way that told me the call hadn't gone well. "Sophie, go get dressed. We're going out this afternoon." "Where?" Sophie asked, already halfway off her stool. "The museum. You've been asking to go." Sophie squealed and bolted upstairs, leaving Adrian and me alone in the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, running a hand through his hair, the first genuinely human gesture I'd seen from him. "That was my publicist," he said. "Photos from the gala are already circulating. People are asking questions." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "The usual. Who you are, how we met, why I've been hiding you." He met my eyes. "We need to get ahead of this. I've scheduled a few public appearances over the next 2 weeks. Lunch tomorrow, a gallery opening on Friday, a hospital benefit next Saturday." "That's a lot of exposure." "That's the point." Adrian's voice was clipped, controlled. "The faster we establish this relationship is real, the less scrutiny we'll face." I nodded, my throat tight. "Okay. And Lily." He stepped closer, his gray eyes searching mine. "Sophie likes you." "That's good. But remember the rules. Don't let her get too attached." "You mean, don't let me get too attached?" "I mean both." His expression softened, just slightly. "This ends in a year, maybe less. I need you to remember that." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that you couldn't control feelings like a business contract, that people weren't variables in an equation. But I just nodded again, because what else could I do? Adrian turned away, already moving on to the next task, the next problem to solve. And I stood there in his perfect kitchen, surrounded by his perfect life, wondering what the hell I'd signed up for. The museum trip was supposed to be simple, low-key. Just the three of us wandering through exhibits, blending into the weekend crowd. But the moment we stepped out of Adrian's car, a sleek black SUV that probably cost more than most people's houses, I realized nothing about this life was ever going to be simple. People stared. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make my skin prickle with awareness. Enough to remind me that Adrian Cole wasn't just some random guy. He was someone. And now, apparently, so was I. Sophie didn't seem to notice. She skipped ahead, her hand clasped tightly in Adrian's, chattering about the dinosaur exhibit she wanted to see. Adrian listened with the same focused attention he'd given her at breakfast, occasionally glancing back to make sure I was keeping up. "Stay close," he murmured when I fell a step behind. "People are watching." I noticed. His hand found mine, warm and steady, and I nearly jumped. He'd warned me about this. The necessary touches, the performance of intimacy, but knowing it was coming didn't make it any less jarring. "Relax," Adrian said quietly. "You look terrified." I feel terrified. Don't. We're just a family spending the day together. He squeezed my hand gently. Smile. I forced my face into something that might pass for happiness and let him guide me through the museum entrance. Sophie raced ahead to the ticket counter, bouncing on her toes while Adrian paid for our admission. The woman behind the counter smiled at us, warm, genuine, and I realized she had no idea this was all fake. To her, we were just another family, a father, his daughter, his partner. Normal. Real. The thought made my chest ache. We spent the next 2 hours wandering through exhibits. Sophie dragged us to the dinosaurs first, pressing her face against glass cases and asking Adrian questions he somehow always knew the answers to. Then the ancient civilizations wing, where she marveled at mummies and pottery and artifacts that were older than most countries. Adrian stayed close the whole time, his hand occasionally resting on my lower back or his fingers brushing mine, small touches that looked natural but felt calculated. He was good at this. Too good. Lily, look! Sophie grabbed my hand, pulling me toward a display of Egyptian jewelry. Isn't it pretty? It's beautiful, I agreed, crouching down to her level. See the lapis lazuli? That blue stone? Artists still use it today. Really? Really, it's one of the oldest pigments in the world. Sophie's eyes went wide and she immediately started peppering me with more questions. I answered them as best I could, aware of Adrian watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. When Sophie finally ran off to look at another case, Adrian moved to stand beside me. You're good with her. She's easy to be good with, I said honestly. She's a great kid. She is. Adrian's voice softened, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of something beneath the ice. Pride, maybe, or love. Her mother left when she was 2, decided she didn't want the responsibility. I turned to look at him surprised. I'm sorry? Don't be. It was for the best. His jaw tightened. She would have been a terrible mother. Sophie deserves better. She has better, I said quietly. She has you. Adrian's eyes met mine and something passed between us. Brief, electric, gone almost before I could name it. Then Sophie came bounding back, breaking the moment, and we moved on to the next exhibit. We had lunch in the museum cafe, Sophie talking nonstop about everything she'd seen while Adrian and I shared a sandwich neither of us seemed particularly hungry for. When we finally left, the afternoon sun was already starting to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Can we come back next week? Sophie asked, climbing into her car seat. Please? We'll see, Adrian said, buckling her in. Depends on the schedule. Lily can come too, right? Adrian glanced at me over Sophie's head. If she wants to. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Sophie beamed, and Adrian closed the door, leaving the 2 of us standing beside the car. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You did well today, he said finally. People will talk, but it'll be the right kind of talk. Glad I could perform adequately, I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Adrian's eyes narrowed. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I crossed my arms. This whole thing is a performance. You said so yourself. Yes, but that doesn't mean... He broke off, shaking his head. Never mind. Let's go home. He didn't say another word the entire drive back. The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Adrian left early for the hospital, returning in the evenings to have dinner with Sophie and me. We'd eat together, sometimes talking, sometimes not, and then he'd disappear into his study while I helped Sophie with homework or played games until bedtime. It felt almost normal, except for the undercurrent of tension that never quite went away. The public appearances started that Friday. Lunch at an upscale restaurant where Adrian knew half the people in the room. A gallery opening where we stood side by side, his hand on my waist, while strangers asked me questions about my background and how we'd met. I recited the story we'd rehearsed, hospital benefit, 6 months ago, love at first sight, and watched their faces light up with the kind of romantic satisfaction people always seem to crave. Adrian played his part perfectly, attentive but not overly affectionate, protective without being possessive. He made it look easy. I felt like I was drowning. You're doing fine, he murmured during a brief moment alone. We stood near a painting I didn't understand, pretending to study it while the crowd milled around us. Just breathe. I'm breathing. You're hyperventilating. I shot him a look. I'm not used to lying to this many people at once. It's not lying, Adrian said calmly. It's selective truth. That's literally the definition of lying. His mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile. Fair point. A woman in a red dress approached us then, her eyes bright with curiosity. Dr. Cole, I didn't know you were seeing anyone. How wonderful. Adrian's hand tightened on my waist. Margaret, good to see you. This is Lily Harper, my fiancée. Fiancée! Margaret's voice pitched up an octave. Oh, how lovely. When's the wedding? We haven't set a date yet, I said, forcing a smile. We're taking our time. Of course, of course. Margaret beamed at us. Well, you two make a stunning couple. Absolutely stunning. She drifted away, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Adrian's hand stayed on my waist, warm through the thin fabric of my dress. That wasn't so bad, he said. Easy for you to say. You're used to this. I'm used to a lot of things. His voice dropped, just slightly. That doesn't mean I like them. I glanced up at him, surprised, but his expression had already shifted back to neutral, closed off, untouchable. We stayed another hour making small talk and sipping champagne neither of us wanted, before finally escaping to the car. The moment the doors closed, Adrian's shoulders dropped, and he leaned his head back against the seat. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not running. He turned to look at me, his gray eyes tired in a way I'd never seen before. I know this isn't easy. No, I agreed. It's not. We drove in silence after that, the city lights blurring past the windows. When we got home, Sophie was already asleep, and the house felt too big, too quiet. I said goodnight and retreated to my room, closing the door behind me and sinking onto the bed. My phone buzzed, a text from my dad. Your mom's latest scans came back clear. Doctor says the treatment is working. I don't know how we're paying for this, Lil, but thank you. I stared at the message, my throat tight. This was why I was here. This was the point. My mom was getting better because I'd signed a contract and agreed to pretend to love a man I barely knew. It was worth it. It had to be worth it. But as I lay there in the dark, listening to the silence of Adrian's perfect house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing pieces of myself with every lie I told. The hospital benefit was worse. Adrian had warned me it would be a bigger event, more cameras, more scrutiny, more people who mattered in his world. What he hadn't warned me about was how exposed I'd feel walking into that ballroom in a borrowed gown, his hand on my arm, knowing that every single person in the room was watching us. Sophie had stayed home with a sitter, which meant it was just the two of us navigating the crowd. Adrian introduced me to doctors, donors, people whose last names I recognized from buildings and foundations. I smiled, nodded, recited my lines, and tried not to think about how many ways this could all fall apart. You're tense, Adrian murmured during a lull in conversation. We stood near the bar, his hand resting lightly on my lower back. Relax. I'm trying. Try harder. His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. People can tell when you're uncomfortable. Maybe I wouldn't be uncomfortable if this wasn't all fake. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Adrian's hand stilled, his expression flickering with something I couldn't name. Lily. Dr. Cole. A man in a tuxedo appeared beside us, grinning broadly. I heard congratulations are in order. Engaged, who would have thought? Adrian's mask slid back into place instantly. David, good to see you. This is Lily Harper. David shook my hand with too much enthusiasm. A pleasure. You must be something special to have caught this one's attention. He's been a confirmed bachelor for years. I got lucky, I said, the lie tasting bitter. We both did, Adrian added smoothly, his hand finding mine. David laughed and launched into a story about a surgery he and Adrian had worked on together. I half listened, my attention drifting to the couples around us. Real couples, probably. People who'd chosen to be here together, who weren't counting down the months until their contract ended. Excuse us, Adrian said suddenly, cutting David off mid-sentence. I need to steal Lily for a moment. He guided me toward a quieter corner, his hand firm on my elbow. When we were out of earshot, he turned to face me, his expression hard. What's wrong? Nothing. Don't lie to me. His eyes searched mine. You've been off all night. I pulled my arm free, frustration bubbling up. Maybe because this is exhausting, Adrian, pretending to be someone I'm not, lying to everyone, acting like this is real when we both know it's not. You signed the contract. I know I signed the contract. My voice rose, and I forced myself to lower it. I know what I agreed to, but that doesn't make it easy. Adrian's jaw tightened. I never said it would be easy. I said it would be necessary. For you, maybe. For your reputation, your image, your perfect little life. I shook my head. But what about me? What about what I'm giving up? You're being compensated. It's not about the money. The words burst out of me, raw and honest. It's about standing here in this room full of people, pretending to be something I'm not, and wondering if I even recognize myself anymore. Adrian stared at me, something shifting in his expression. For a moment I thought he might actually say something real, something human. But then his walls slammed back up, and he took a step back. If you want to end this, he said quietly, tell me now. I'll write you a check and you can walk away. I wanted to. Part of me wanted to so badly it hurt. But then I thought about my mom, about my dad, about the life I'd been struggling to hold together before Adrian had offered me this deal. No, I said finally. I'm not walking away. Then get it together. His voice was cold now, clinical. This is what you signed up for. This is the job. Do it. He turned and walked back into the crowd, leaving me standing there alone, my chest tight and my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. I hated him in that moment, hated his control, his coldness, his ability to treat people like chess pieces. But more than that, I hated that he was right. This was the job, and I'd agreed to do it. I took a breath, smoothed down my dress, and followed him back into the crowd. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Adrian kept his distance, only approaching when necessary for appearances. We danced once, a slow, stiff waltz that felt more like a hostage situation than romance, and then went back to circulating separately. By the time we finally left, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. The car ride home was silent. Adrian stared out the window, his jaw tight, and I did the same on my side. When we pulled into the driveway, I got out before he could open my door and headed straight inside. Lily. I stopped, not turning around. What? I'm sorry. The words were so unexpected that I did turn around then. Adrian stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. For what? I asked. For being harsh. For forgetting that this is difficult for you too. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger. I'm not good at this. At people. I've noticed. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I know this arrangement is complicated. I know I'm asking a lot. But I need you to understand that I'm trying. Trying to what? To make this work. He took a step closer. For Sophie's sake. And for yours. I wanted to stay angry. I wanted to hold on to the frustration and hurt from earlier. But looking at him now, tired, uncertain, almost vulnerable, I couldn't. Okay, I said quietly. Okay? I'll try too. Adrian nodded, something like relief crossing his face. Thank you. He turned to go inside and I followed, the tension between us easing just slightly. Maybe this could work. Maybe we could find a way to make this arrangement bearable for both of us. But as I climbed the stairs to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both lying to ourselves about what this really was. And sooner or later, the truth was going to catch up with us. The weeks that followed blurred together in a strange mix of routine and performance. Mornings with Sophie became the parts of the day I actually looked forward to. Her chatter over breakfast, the way she'd show me her drawings before school, how she'd grab my hand when Adrian wasn't looking and whisper secrets about her stuffed cats. She'd started calling me by my first name without hesitation, sometimes forgetting to add the careful distance kids usually kept with adults who weren't quite family. Adrian noticed. I could tell by the way he'd watch us sometimes, his expression unreadable, that crease between his eyebrows deepening like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. She's getting attached, he said one evening after Sophie had gone to bed. We were in the living room, him with a medical journal, me with a sketchbook I'd been half-heartedly filling. To you. I didn't look up. Kids do that. I told you not to let it happen. And I told you that's not how feelings work. I set down my pencil, meeting his eyes. You can't control everything, Adrian. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just went back to his journal, and I went back to my sketch. And the silence between us felt heavier than it should have. The truth was, Sophie wasn't the only one getting attached. I'd started memorizing the way Adrian took his coffee. Black, no sugar, always in the same navy blue mug. I noticed when he came home late from the hospital with that particular tiredness around his eyes that meant he'd lost a patient. I'd learned that he couldn't cook anything except pancakes and grilled cheese, that he read Sophie the same 3 bedtime stories on rotation because those were the ones his own father had read to him, that he had a tell when he was stressed. He'd run his thumb along his jaw in this unconscious gesture that made him look almost vulnerable. I was noticing too much, caring too much. And that terrified me more than any public appearance ever could. The media attention had died down somewhat, settling into a steady hum of interest rather than the initial frenzy. Photos of us appeared in society columns, Adrian and Lily at a restaurant, at a charity auction, leaving his office building hand in hand. The comments were mostly positive, though there were always a few that made my stomach turn. Gold digger. She's only with him for the money. Give it 6 months before she's gone. Adrian told me to ignore them, said that people would always talk, that it didn't matter what strangers thought. But it mattered to me. Because even though this was fake, even though I'd signed a contract and cashed a check, I didn't want to be seen as the kind of person who'd sell herself for security. Even if that's exactly what I'd done. Stop reading the comments, Adrian said one Saturday morning, plucking my phone from my hands. We were in his study, him working through paperwork, me supposedly sketching but actually spiraling down a rabbit hole of online gossip. It's not good for you. I'm just curious what people think. People think whatever confirms what they already believe. He set my phone on his desk, out of reach. Their opinions don't change reality. And what's reality? I asked, more sharply than I intended. That this is all pretend? That we're lying to everyone, including your daughter? Adrian's eyes flashed. Sophie is happy. She has stability. That's what matters. She has a lie. She has a father who loves her and someone who's kind to her. That's more than a lot of kids get. His voice was hard now, defensive. Don't act like this is hurting her. I'm not... I broke off, frustrated. I'm just saying that eventually she's going to figure it out. Kids aren't stupid. By the time she figures anything out, the contract will be over, and you'll be gone. The words came out flat, matter of fact, and they hit me like a punch to the chest. I stood up, grabbing my sketchbook. Right, of course. Wouldn't want anyone to actually matter. Lily, but I was already walking out, my throat tight and my eyes burning. I made it to my room before the tears came, and I hated myself for crying over a man who'd never pretended to offer me anything more than money. We didn't talk for 2 days after that. Adrian threw himself into work, coming home late and leaving early, communicating through brief texts about schedules and appearances. Sophie noticed the tension, asked me why Daddy seemed sad, why I seemed sad, whether we'd had a fight. I told her everything was fine, that adults just got stressed sometimes, and tried not to think about how easily the lies came now. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I'd spent the afternoon at my mom's hospital, sitting beside her bed while she slept, the steady beep of monitors the only sound. The treatment was working. She looked better than she had in months, color back in her cheeks, that spark returning to her eyes when she was awake. But watching her lying there, knowing I'd bought her this chance by pretending to love someone, made me feel hollow. When I got back to Adrian's house, it was late. The lights were off except for a soft glow from the kitchen. I found him there, sitting at the island with a glass of whiskey, still in his scrubs. Rough day? I asked quietly. He looked up and I saw it immediately. The exhaustion, the grief, the weight of whatever had happened at the hospital. I lost a patient. 8-year-old girl, brain tumor. I'd operated twice, thought we had more time. I didn't think. I just moved around the island and wrapped my arms around him from behind, resting my cheek against his shoulder. He went rigid for a second, then relaxed, his hand coming up to cover mine. I'm sorry, I whispered. It happens. His voice was rough. Not often, but it happens. Doesn't make it easier. We stayed like that for a long moment, the kitchen quiet around us. Then Adrian turned on the stool, his hands finding my waist, and suddenly we were face to face, too close, breathing the same air. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for this, for being here." "I live here," I said, trying for lightness. "Kind of hard to be anywhere else." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You know what I mean." "Yeah," I did. "I'm sorry I've been difficult." "You haven't been difficult. You've been honest." Adrian's hands tightened slightly on my waist. "I'm the one who's been a control freak?" I was going to say distant, but control freak works too. I laughed, surprising both of us, and something shifted. The air between us changed, charged with something I didn't want to name. Adrian's eyes dropped to my mouth, and my breath caught. This was dangerous. This was breaking every rule we'd set. But when he leaned in, I didn't pull away. The kiss started gentle, testing, careful, like he was afraid I'd run. But then my hands found his hair and his fingers dug into my waist, and it stopped being gentle. It became desperate, hungry, everything we'd been pretending not to feel for the past 2 months pouring out in the space between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against mine. "That was a mistake," he said. "Probably," I agreed. "We should forget it happened." "Definitely." But neither of us moved. We stayed there, tangled together in his kitchen, the weight of what we'd just done settling over us like snow. "I can't do this," Adrian said finally, pulling back. "I can't. This isn't what we agreed to." "I know. The contract, I know, Adrian." I stepped away, wrapping my arms around myself. "I know what the contract says. No emotional attachment, clean break when it's over. I know. Then why—" He broke off, running a hand through his hair. "Why does this feel so complicated?" "Because we're human." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same confusion and fear I felt mirrored in his eyes. Because you can't actually control feelings with a piece of paper, no matter how many lawyers you hire. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his glass, drained it, and set it down with careful precision. "This can't happen again." "Agreed. I mean it, Lily. We have 7 months left on the contract. I can't afford to let this become something it's not." "It won't." The lie tasted bitter, but I said it anyway. "It was just a moment. We were both upset. It doesn't mean anything." He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Neither was I. Adrian left the kitchen first, and I stood there alone, touching my lips and wondering how something that felt so right could be such a massive mistake. The next morning, everything was awkward. Adrian barely looked at me during breakfast, and Sophie kept glancing between us with that worried expression kids got when they sensed something was wrong but didn't understand what. "Are you guys fighting again?" she asked finally, pushing her cereal around her bowl. "No," Adrian and I said simultaneously. Sophie didn't look convinced. "You're being weird." "We're just tired, sweetheart," Adrian said, his voice gentler. "I had a long night at the hospital." "And I have a lot of homework for my classes," I added. "Sometimes adults are just stressed." "Okay." Sophie went back to her cereal, but I could tell she wasn't buying it. The weirdness continued for days. Adrian and I moved around each other carefully, avoiding touch, keeping conversations strictly professional. The public appearances continued. We had a schedule to maintain. But now every time his hand found mine or his arm wrapped around my waist, I felt that kiss echoing between us. It was torture. "You're being stupid," my roommate told me when I called her one afternoon, desperate for someone to talk to. "You like him. He obviously likes you. Why are you making this so complicated?" "Because it's a contract, Jess. A business arrangement. It has an end date. So renegotiate. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Jess's voice was blunt. "Look, I know you needed the money. I know you did this for your mom, but that doesn't mean it has to stay fake forever. If there's something real happening, why not explore it?" "Because he doesn't want real," I said quietly. "He's made that clear from the beginning. This is about control for him, about protecting Sophie and his reputation. I'm just a solution to a problem." "Does he treat you like a solution to a problem?" I thought about the way Adrian had held me in the kitchen, the way he'd kissed me like he was drowning and I was air, the way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. "No," I admitted, "but that doesn't change what this is." Maybe it should. After I hung up, I sat in my room for a long time, staring at nothing. Jess was right, in a way. Something had shifted between Adrian and me. We'd crossed a line, and now I couldn't unsee what was on the other side. The question was whether Adrian could see it too, or whether he was too busy building walls to notice. The answer came 2 weeks later, at an event neither of us wanted to attend. It was a medical conference gala, the kind of thing Adrian normally avoided but had to show up to for professional reasons. He'd warned me it would be boring, full of doctors talking shop and pharmaceutical reps schmoozing for contracts. What he hadn't warned me about was the woman who'd cornered him the moment we walked in. She was beautiful in that sharp, polished way, designer dress, perfect hair, the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. And the way she looked at Adrian made my stomach turn. Adrian Cole. Her smile was bright, predatory. I heard you were engaged. I had to see it to believe it. Victoria. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. This is Lily Harper. Lily, this is Dr. Victoria Chen. We worked together a few years ago. Worked together? Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Is that what we're calling it now? Adrian's hand tightened on my waist. It was nice seeing you, Victoria. If you'll excuse us. Oh, don't run off. Victoria's eyes slid to me, assessing. I'm curious. How did you manage to catch the great Adrian Cole? He's been immune to relationships for as long as I've known him. I didn't catch anyone, I said, keeping my voice steady. We met. We connected. It's not that complicated, isn't it? Victoria tilted her head. Because Adrian doesn't do connections. He does control, calculation. Everything in his life is planned down to the minute. So forgive me if I'm skeptical that he suddenly fell head over heels for, what did you say you do? I'm an art student. How charming. The word dripped condescension. Well, enjoy it while it lasts. Adrian gets bored easily. She walked away, leaving a wake of tension behind her. Adrian's jaw was tight, his hand still locked on my waist like he was afraid I'd disappear. I'm sorry, he said quietly. She's an ex? A mistake. Adrian looked down at me, his gray eyes dark. A long time ago, before Sophie. It didn't mean anything. Unlike us, I said, and immediately regretted it. Adrian's expression shuddered. Lily, forget it. Let's just get through this night. But I couldn't forget it. Victoria's words echoed in my head for the rest of the evening, mixing with every doubt I'd been trying to ignore. Adrian gets bored easily. Everything in his life is planned. This is just control. What if she was right? What if that kiss, those moments when Adrian seemed almost human, were just anomalies? What if I was reading meaning into something that was still, at its core, a transaction? The thought made me feel sick. We left the gala early, claiming exhaustion. The car ride home was silent, tension thick enough to choke on. When we got back to the house, Adrian walked me to the stairs, his hand catching my elbow before I could escape. Don't let her get to you, he said. Victoria doesn't know anything about us. Neither do we, I said quietly. Do we? Adrian's hand dropped. What do you want me to say, Lily? I want you to tell me what this is. I turned to face him fully. Because I can't keep doing this. Pretending in public, pretending in private, not knowing what's real and what's performance. The contract is clear. Screw the contract. The words burst out of me. I'm not talking about the contract. I'm talking about what happened in the kitchen 2 weeks ago. I'm talking about the way you look at me sometimes, like I'm not just some employee you hired. I'm talking about whether any of this actually means something to you, or if I'm just the latest problem you've solved. Adrian stared at me, something raw flickering across his face. For a moment, I thought he might actually answer honestly, but then his walls slammed back up and his expression went cold. You should get some sleep, he said. We have brunch with my colleagues tomorrow. Early start. It felt like a slap. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked up the stairs without looking back. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every touch, every moment that had made me think this might be becoming something real. And I realized, with a clarity that hurt, that I'd fallen for him. Not the billionaire surgeon, not the controlled, calculating man who'd offered me a contract, but the father who read the same bedtime stories every night, the man who'd held me when I cried, the person underneath all that ice who was so terrified of being hurt that he'd built a fortress around his heart. I'd fallen for Adrian Cole, and he was never going to let me in. The next morning, I packed a bag. Not everything. I wasn't stupid enough to think I could just leave without consequences, but enough for a few days. I needed space, needed to breathe, needed to figure out if I could actually survive the next 7 months without destroying myself in the process. I left a note on the kitchen counter, visiting my mom for a few days. Tell Sophie I'm sorry I'll miss our museum trip. L. Then I called a car and walked out of Adrian Cole's perfect house before he woke up. I spent 3 days at my parents' place, helping my mom with physical therapy and avoiding my dad's questions about why I looked so miserable. My mom knew something was wrong. Mothers always did, but she didn't push. She just held my hand and told me that sometimes the hardest thing about love was figuring out if it was worth the risk. I didn't tell her that the man I'd fallen for didn't believe in risk. He believed in control. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Adrian, calls I didn't answer, voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. On the third day, Sophie's name popped up on the screen. I answered before I could stop myself. Lily? Her voice was small, worried. Where are you? I'm visiting my mom, sweetie. Remember? I left a note. I know, but Daddy said you'd be back today and you're not. And he's being weird again, and She sniffled, and my heart cracked. Did I do something wrong? No. I closed my eyes, my throat tight. Sophie, you didn't do anything wrong. I promise. Then why did you leave? Sometimes adults need space to think. It's not about you, it's about... I broke off, not sure how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. It's complicated. I miss you, Sophie said quietly. I miss you too. Will you come back? I looked around my childhood bedroom, at the life I'd had before Adrian Cole had walked into it and turned everything upside down. I could stay here, walk away from the contract, return the money, go back to struggling and barely surviving, but at least being honest. Or I could go back, face whatever this was with Adrian, risk getting hurt for the chance at something real. Yeah, I said finally, I'll come back. Promise? I promise. When I hung up, I found a text from Adrian waiting. Just 4 words. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back a single word. Okay. I went back that evening, my stomach in knots the entire drive. When I walked through the front door, I found Adrian in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes searching my face. You came back, he said. I told Sophie I would. Not me? I didn't think you cared. Adrian flinched. Of course I care. You disappeared for 3 days without... He broke off, running a hand through his hair. Do you have any idea what that was like? Not knowing if you were coming back? If you'd decided this was too much? You mean if I'd decided to break the contract? I mean if I'd lost you. The words came out rough, raw, and they stopped me cold. Not the arrangement, not the deal. You. I set down my bag slowly. What are you saying, Adrian? I'm saying that I've spent the past 3 days realizing that Victoria was wrong. I don't get bored. I get terrified. He took a step toward me. I'm terrified of what you've become to me, of how much I look forward to seeing you in the morning, of how wrong everything felt when you were gone. My heart was hammering. The contract. Screw the contract. He echoed my words from days ago, and a shocked laugh escaped me. I know what it says. I wrote it. But I can't keep pretending this is just business when it stopped being business the moment I kissed you in that kitchen. You said it was a mistake. It was, because it made everything complicated. Because it made me realize that I don't want you here because of an agreement. Adrian closed the distance between us, his hands framing my face. I want you here because I'm falling for you, Lily Harper, and that terrifies me more than anything else in my life ever has. I stared at him, barely breathing. Say that again. I'm falling for you. You don't do emotional attachment. I don't. I didn't. I've spent years building walls to make sure I never felt this vulnerable again. His thumb brushed my cheek. And then you walked into my life and dismantled every single one of them without even trying. Adrian, I know this is messy. I know it breaks our agreement. I know all the logical reasons why this is a terrible idea. His voice dropped. but I can't let you walk away thinking you don't matter. Because you do. You matter to Sophie. You matter to me. And if you want to leave, if this is too much, I'll understand. But I needed you to know the truth first. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't try to stop them. You're an idiot. Adrian's eyes widened. What? You're an idiot for thinking I could spend months living in your house, getting to know you, caring about your daughter, and not fall for you too. I grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. I've been falling for you since that first night when you stepped in to defend me. Maybe earlier. I don't even know anymore. Lily, shut up and kiss me. He did. This kiss was different from the first one. Less desperate, more deliberate. A choice we were both making with open eyes, knowing exactly what it meant and not caring about the consequences. When we finally broke apart, both of us were smiling. So, Adrian said, his forehead resting against mine. What do we do now? I have no idea. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Your contract didn't exactly have a clause for this. We'll figure it out. His hand slid down to my waist, holding me close. Together. Together, I agreed. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I believed we actually might. The morning after felt surreal. I woke up in my own room. We'd agreed to take things slow, not complicate things further, but when I came downstairs, Adrian was making pancakes and Sophie was setting the table, and something fundamental had shifted. The air felt lighter, the house felt warmer. Or maybe that was just me, finally allowing myself to feel something other than constant anxiety. Lily! Sophie threw her arms around my waist the moment she saw me. You're back. I told Daddy you'd come back. I promised, didn't I? I hugged her tight, catching Adrian's eyes over her head. He was watching us with an expression I'd never seen before. Soft, unguarded, almost happy. She wouldn't stop talking about you, he said. 3 days of, when's Lily coming home? And why did Lily leave? And do you think Lily still likes us? Of course I still like you. I ruffled Sophie's hair. Both of you. Sophie beamed and dragged me to the table, chattering about everything I'd missed. A spelling test she'd aced. A new drawing she'd made. How Princess Whiskers had defeated the evil Lord Fluffington in an epic stuffed animal battle. I listened to every word, acutely aware of Adrian moving around the kitchen, the domestic normalcy of it all making my chest ache in the best way. When Sophie finally paused to take a breath, Adrian set a plate in front of me. His hand brushed my shoulder as he passed, a brief touch that sent electricity down my spine. Thank you, I said quietly. For the pancakes? For everything. His fingers squeezed gently before he moved away. Sophie didn't notice, she was too busy drowning her pancakes in syrup, but the gesture felt significant, a promise, a beginning. The next few weeks were strange in the best possible way. We didn't tell Sophie anything had changed. She was 7, and explaining the shift from fake relationship to real one felt unnecessarily complicated. But things were different. Adrian stopped treating our touches like transactions. When he took my hand at events now, it wasn't for show. When he wrapped his arm around my waist, I could feel the difference in how he held me. And at home, away from cameras and crowds, he'd find small ways to be close, standing beside me while I helped Sophie with homework, sitting next to me on the couch instead of across the room, his hand finding mine in the quiet moments between tasks. We still hadn't told anyone. The public still thought we were the same couple they'd been reading about for months. But now when reporters asked how we'd met or when the wedding was, the answers came easier, because somewhere along the way, the lie had become something closer to truth. You're smiling, my mom said during one of my visits. She was doing better, hair growing back, color in her cheeks, moving without the exhaustion that had defined her for so long. Like, actually smiling, not that fake one you've been wearing. I don't know what you're talking about. Lily. She gave me that look only mothers could pull off. I've known you for 23 years. You think I can't tell when something's changed? I bit my lip, then gave in. Okay, maybe things are different. With Adrian? How did you... Because you light up when you say his name. She reached across the hospital bed. She was there for a routine checkup, not treatment, which felt like a miracle, and squeezed my hand. Tell me. So I did. Not everything. I left out the contract, the arrangement, the parts that would make her worry, but I told her about Sophie, about Adrian's walls and how they'd started coming down, about how terrified and hopeful I felt all at once. "He sounds complicated," Mom said when I finished. "He is. And you love him." It wasn't a question. I opened my mouth to deny it, then stopped. Because she was right. Somewhere between the fake engagement and the real kisses, between watching him with his daughter and seeing the man underneath the ice, I'd fallen completely. "Yeah," I whispered. "I do." "Does he know?" "I haven't told him." "Why not?" "Because I was terrified. Because even though he'd said he was falling for me, love felt like a different thing entirely. Because there was still a contract sitting in his study with an end date, and we hadn't talked about what happened when we reached it. "It's complicated," I said finally. Mom smiled sadly. "Love usually is." The complication became clear 3 days later when a reporter ambushed us outside a restaurant. We'd been having lunch, just the two of us, a rare afternoon without Sophie or work obligations. Adrian had been telling me about a surgery he was planning, his eyes animated in a way they only got when he talked about medicine, when a woman with a camera appeared beside our table. "Dr. Cole, Lily, just a few questions." "We're not doing interviews," Adrian said, his voice going cold and professional instantly. "Please respect our privacy. Just one question." The woman smiled, sharp and hungry. "There are rumors that your engagement is a publicity stunt, that Lily was hired to improve your image. Any comment?" The blood drained from my face. Adrian's hand tightened on mine, but his expression stayed neutral. "Those rumors are absurd," he said calmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us. So you're denying that your relationship is contractual, that there's no financial arrangement between you?" People at nearby tables were watching now. I felt exposed, pinned under lights I couldn't escape. Adrian stood, pulling me up with him. "This conversation is over." We left the restaurant quickly, ignoring the reporter's shouted questions. Adrian's jaw was set, his hand locked around mine like he was afraid I'd disappear. We didn't speak until we were in his car, the doors closed, shutting out the world. "How did they—" I started. "I don't know." Adrian's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Someone must have leaked something, an employee maybe, or someone from the legal team. What do we do?" "Nothing. We ignore it. Rumors like this die out if you don't feed them." But his voice lacked conviction. We both knew this was different. This wasn't speculation about who I was or why Adrian had suddenly gotten engaged. This was someone with actual information, or at least close enough to the truth to be dangerous. "Adrian," I turned to face him. "What happens if this gets out? If people find out about the contract?" "It won't." "But if it does—" "It won't." His voice was hard now, defensive. "I've built my entire life on discretion, on control. I'm not going to let some reporter destroy that." "I'm not talking about your reputation," I said quietly. "I'm talking about us." Adrian went still. "What do you mean?" "I mean that if this comes out, everyone will think everything between us is fake. They'll think I'm just some gold digger who sold herself for money, and you're some cold bastard who bought a relationship instead of having a real one." My throat tightened. "And maybe they won't be completely wrong." "Lily, we started as a transaction, Adrian, that's the truth. And if people find out about the contract, how do we convince them? How do we convince anyone that what we have now is real?" He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Because we both knew that the foundation of this relationship was built on lies, and no amount of real feeling could erase that. We drove home in silence, and when we got there, Adrian disappeared into his study without a word. I found Sophie in the living room playing with her stuffed animals and forced myself to smile. "Hey, sweetheart, want to watch a movie?" "Where's Daddy?" "Working." Sophie frowned. "He's always working lately, and you guys are being weird again." "We're not being weird." "Yes, you are. You're smiling, but you look sad. And Daddy keeps doing that thing where he rubs his jaw when he's stressed." She hugged Princess Whiskers to her chest. "Are you going to leave again?" The question hit me like a punch. "No, Sophie, no, I'm not leaving." "Promise?" I thought about the contract, about the ticking clock we'd been ignoring, about how in 4 months I was supposed to walk away from this house and this little girl and the man I'd stupidly fallen in love with. "I promise," I said, and hoped I wasn't lying. The media storm hit the next morning. It started with a blog post, some gossip site that specialized in takedowns of the wealthy and powerful. The headline made my stomach drop. Dr. Adrian Cole's fake fiancée. The contract relationship that fooled everyone. The article was vicious. It outlined our entire arrangement in damning detail. The timeline, the public appearances, even quotes from anonymous sources about how Adrian had needed a cover to avoid arranged marriages and I'd needed money. They didn't have the actual contract, thank God, but they had enough to make it clear this wasn't baseless speculation. By noon, it had been picked up by larger outlets. By evening, we were trending on social media. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from friends, from my dad asking what the hell was going on, from journalists requesting comments. I turned it off and sat in my room, staring at nothing. Adrian knocked around 7. "Can I come in?" "It's your house." He came in anyway, closing the door behind him. He looked exhausted, hair disheveled, tie loosened, that crease between his eyebrows deeper than I'd ever seen it. "I've called my lawyers," he said. "They're working on a response. We'll deny everything, threaten lawsuits, make this go away." "Will that work?" "It has to." "Adrian." I looked up at him. "What if it doesn't? What if this just keeps getting worse?" "Then we weather it. Together." He sat beside me on the bed, his hand finding mine. "I'm not going to let them destroy you over this." "I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about Sophie, about what this does to her." I squeezed his hand. "She's already asking questions. What do we tell her when kids at school start saying her dad bought a fake family?" Adrian flinched. "We'll figure it out." "How? By lying more? By pretending this didn't start as a business deal?" I pulled my hand away, standing up. "Maybe we should just tell the truth." "Absolutely not." "Why not? Everyone already knows." "They don't know anything. They have rumors, speculation. If we confirm it, if we admit that yes, this started as a contract, we lose everything." Adrian stood too, his voice rising. "My reputation, your credibility, Sophie's stability, all of it gone because we decided to be honest about something that doesn't even matter anymore. It matters if it's true. The truth is that I love you." The words exploded out of him, raw and desperate. "The truth is that whatever this started as, it's real now, and I'm not going to let some hack journalist take that away from us." I stared at him, my heart hammering. "What did you say?" Adrian's expression shifted, surprise, fear, vulnerability all flashing across his face before he could hide them. "I said I love you, and I know that's not... I know we haven't..." He broke off, running a hand through his hair. "I wasn't planning to say it like this, but it's true. I love you, Lily." Tears were streaming down my face. "You love me." "Yes. Even though this is messy and complicated and potentially destroying everything you've built?" "Especially because of that." Adrian closed the distance between us, his hands cupping my face. "You make me want to be someone who takes risks, who lets people in, who believes that something can be real even if it started as a lie." "I love you too," I whispered. "I've been trying not to, but I do. So much it terrifies me." He kissed me then, soft and desperate and full of everything we'd been too afraid to say. When we broke apart, we were both crying. "So what do we do?" I asked. "About the media? About the rumors? About all of this?" "We tell the truth." Adrian's voice was steady now, certain. "Not to them. To the people who matter. To Sophie. To your parents. We tell them that yes, this started as an arrangement, but it became real. And then we let everyone else think whatever they want. And if they don't believe us, then they don't believe us." He rested his forehead against mine. "But I'm done living my life based on what other people think. I'm done being controlled by fear. You taught me that." "I didn't teach you anything. I just showed up and made everything complicated." "Exactly." He smiled, and it reached his eyes. "Best thing that ever happened to me." We talked for hours that night, making plans and facing fears and figuring out how to build something real from the wreckage of what we'd started. It wasn't going to be easy. The media would keep digging, people would keep talking, and there would be consequences we couldn't predict. But for the first time since this whole thing began, I felt like we had a chance. The conversation with Sophie happened the next morning. We sat her down after breakfast, both of us nervous in a way that felt absurdly teenage. "Am I in trouble?" she asked immediately. "No, sweetheart." Adrian pulled her onto his lap. "We just need to talk to you about something important." About the stuff people are saying on the internet? Sophie's eyes were too old for 7. Katie's mom showed Katie the article, and Katie told me at school. She said you and Lily aren't really together, that it's all pretend. My heart sank. Sophie, is it true? She looked between us, her voice small. Are you just pretending to like each other? Adrian and I exchanged a glance. We'd planned what to say, but actually saying it felt impossible. It's complicated, Adrian started. When Lily and I first met, we made an agreement. I needed help with some things, and she needed help with some things, and we decided to help each other. Like a deal? Yes, like a deal. Adrian's arms tightened around her. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being just a deal. We became friends. And then we became more than friends. And now I love her. And she loves me, for real. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she looked at me. Do you really love Daddy? I really do, I said, my voice thick. And you love me? So much. Then I don't care about the deal. Sophie shrugged, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Katie's parents pretend to like each other, and they've been married for like 100 years. At least you guys actually ended up liking each other for real. Adrian laughed, surprised and relieved. That's very wise, Sophie. I know. She wiggled out of his lap and came to me, wrapping her arms around my neck. You're not going to leave because of the stupid internet people, right? No, I promised. I'm not leaving. Good. Because you're part of our family now. She pulled back, serious. And families don't leave. She skipped off to get ready for school, leaving Adrian and me staring at each other in amazement. That went better than expected, I said. She's remarkable. She is. I stood, moving into his arms. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Yeah, Adrian said, holding me close. We are. But the universe had other plans. The lawsuit notification came 3 days later. Victoria Chen, Adrian's ex-colleague who'd confronted us at the gala, had filed a formal complaint claiming that Adrian had entered into a fraudulent relationship to avoid professional obligations. Something about a hospital board position that required family stability, some archaic rule nobody enforced anymore, except when they wanted leverage. She's doing this to ruin me, Adrian said, pacing his study while I sat on the couch, the legal documents spread across the coffee table. She's always resented that I got the promotion she wanted, that I built my practice while hers struggled. This is revenge. Can she actually win? It doesn't matter if she wins. The lawsuit itself is damaging. It keeps the story alive, gives credibility to the rumors. He stopped pacing, his hands braced on the desk. And it puts you in the crosshairs. Me? You'll have to testify. Answer questions about the contract, about our arrangement, about everything. Adrian turned to look at me, his face pale. They'll tear you apart, Lily, make you look like exactly what I was, I finished quietly. Someone who took money to fake a relationship. You're more than that. But that's still true. I stood, wrapping my arms around myself. Adrian, maybe I should just leave. End the contract early, walk away before this gets worse. No. The word came out sharp, final. Absolutely not. But if I'm gone, Victoria doesn't have a case. I don't care about the case. Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping my shoulders. I care about you. About us. And I'm not going to let you sacrifice yourself because some bitter woman wants to destroy me. This is destroying you anyway. Then we'll go down fighting. His eyes were fierce. Together. I wanted to believe him. But standing there, looking at the legal documents that outlined every calculated decision we'd made, every lie we'd told, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe we'd been doomed from the start. Maybe you couldn't build something real on a foundation of lies, no matter how hard you tried. The weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing were brutal. Reporters camped outside Adrian's house. My parents were harassed for comments. Even my art school got dragged into it, with administrators asking pointed questions about my enrollment status and funding sources. Adrian tried to shield me from the worst of it. He hired a lawyer specifically for me, arranged for security, did everything in his power to make this easier. But nothing could change the fundamental truth. I was about to stand in front of a judge and admit that yes, I'd been paid to pretend to love someone. The fact that the love had become real somewhere along the way felt almost irrelevant. You don't have to do this, Adrian said the night before the hearing. We were in his bedroom. My things had migrated there over the past few weeks, neither of us wanting to sleep alone, and I was trying on different outfits, trying to find something that screamed credible witness instead of gold digger. Yes, I do. We could settle. Give Victoria whatever she wants, make this go away. And prove her right? Prove everyone right? I turned to face him. No. If we're going to do this, we do it honestly. Honestly might mean losing. Then we lose. I crossed to him, taking his hands. But at least we lose together. At least we lose knowing we tried. Adrian pulled me close, his face buried in my hair. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I made a choice. I pulled back to look at him. Maybe it was the wrong choice for the wrong reasons. But it led me here. To you. And I can't regret that. Even if this destroys everything, even then. He kissed me, slow and deep, and we didn't talk about the hearing anymore that night. We just held each other, pretending that tomorrow wasn't coming and consequences weren't real. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Clinical. Cold. Adrian sat beside his lawyer, looking every inch the powerful surgeon in his perfectly tailored suit. I sat behind them, my own lawyer beside me, watching as Victoria and her legal team took their positions across the aisle. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge Adrian, just sat there with her spine straight and her expression neutral, like this was just another day at work instead of an attempt to destroy someone's life. The judge called the hearing to order and the nightmare began. Victoria's lawyer was good. He painted Adrian as a manipulative man who'd commodified relationships, who'd used his wealth to manufacture a life that looked perfect from the outside while being hollow at the core. He brought up the contract. They'd somehow gotten a copy, or at least parts of it, and read sections aloud that made my stomach turn. In exchange for the sum of $200,000 annually, Miss Harper agrees to pose as Dr. Cole's romantic partner at public events, maintain the appearance of a committed relationship, and reside in his home as needed to support this fiction. Hearing it like that, stripped of context and emotion, made it sound so much worse than it had felt at the time. Then it was my turn to testify. I took the stand, my hands shaking despite my best efforts to appear calm. Victoria's lawyer approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Harper, you signed a contract with Dr. Cole to pretend to be his fiancée, correct? Yes. And you were paid for this service? Yes. So by definition, your relationship with Dr. Cole is transactional, a business arrangement. It was, I said carefully, in the beginning, but not anymore. His tone was mocking. When exactly did it stop being about money, Miss Harper? Was there a specific dollar amount that triggered real feelings? Objection, my lawyer said. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. Counselor, stick to the facts. Victoria's lawyer smiled. Of course. Miss Harper, are you still receiving financial compensation from Dr. Cole? My throat tightened, because the answer was yes. The contract had technically been fulfilled, my mom's treatment paid for, my tuition covered, all the terms met. But Adrian had insisted on continuing support, had set up accounts and trusts that I couldn't access but knew existed. Yes, I said quietly. So you're telling this court that your feelings for Dr. Cole are genuine, even though you continue to profit from the relationship financially. It's not about profit. Just answer the question, Miss Harper. Are you or are you not still receiving money from Dr. Cole? I am. Thank you. No further questions. I stepped down feeling like I'd just confessed to a crime. Adrian's face was carefully blank, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. This was going exactly as badly as we'd feared. The hearing continued for another 2 hours, with more witnesses and more evidence and more systematic dismantling of everything Adrian had built. By the time the judge called a recess, I felt hollowed out. I'm sorry, I told Adrian in the hallway outside the courtroom. I should have said something different. You told the truth. His hands framed my face. That's all you could do. The truth is destroying us. The truth is complicated. Adrian's thumb brushed my cheek. And juries, judges, they don't always know what to do with complicated. What happens now? Now we wait. The judge will make a preliminary ruling next week about whether this moves forward to a full trial. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me like he could shield me from all of this. And whatever happens, we face it together. But I could hear the doubt in his voice, could feel the way he held me just a little too tight, like he was already preparing to let go. The ruling came down on a Wednesday. The lawsuit would proceed to trial. There was sufficient evidence of fraud to warrant a full investigation into Adrian's conduct and our relationship. In the meantime, Adrian was suspended from the hospital board pending the outcome. It's temporary, his lawyer assured us. Once we present our full case, once we show that your feelings are genuine, how do you prove feelings in court? I asked. How do you quantify love? Nobody had an answer. That night I found Adrian in Sophie's room watching her sleep. He did that sometimes when he was stressed, just stood there in the doorway making sure she was okay, like he could protect her from everything bad in the world just by being present. She asked me today if you were going to leave, he said quietly. I told her no, but I'm not sure I was telling the truth. I'm not leaving, Adrian. You should. He turned to look at me, and the exhaustion in his eyes broke my heart. This trial is going to get worse. They're going to dig into every part of your life, question every decision you've made, paint you as someone you're not. And for what? So I can keep a board position I don't even care about? It's not about the board position. It's about Victoria trying to destroy you out of spite. Then let her destroy me. Adrian's voice was flat. I can survive that. But I can't survive watching you get torn apart because of decisions I made. We made them together. No, I made them. I'm the one who offered you that contract. I'm the one who pulled you into this world, into this mess. He stepped closer, his hands gentle on my face. And I love you too much to watch you drown in it. So what are you saying? My voice shook. That you want me to leave? That all of this, everything we've built, that it was for nothing? I'm saying that maybe the kindest thing I can do is let you go before this destroys you completely. The words landed like physical blows. I stepped back, my hands falling to my sides. You're giving up. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The words came out harsh, angry. You're so terrified of losing control, of things not going according to plan, that you'd rather end this yourself than risk fighting for it. That's not... Yes, it is. Tears were streaming down my face now. You said you loved me. You said we'd face this together. But the moment things get hard, the moment you can't fix everything with money or power, you want to quit. Adrian's jaw tightened. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need you to fight for us. I was shouting now, past caring if I woke Sophie. I need you to believe that what we have is worth saving. Of course it's worth saving. Then prove it. Stop trying to make this decision for me and let me choose. I grabbed his shirt, forcing him to look at me. I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing you, Adrian. Even if it's messy, even if we lose everything, I'm choosing us. The question is whether you're brave enough to do the same. He stared at me, something cracking in his expression. Then he pulled me against him, his face buried in my hair, his whole body shaking. I'm terrified, he whispered. I'm so terrified of losing you that I can't think straight. Then stop thinking. I held him tighter. Just feel, just trust that we can get through this. I don't know how. Neither do I. I pulled back to look at him. But we'll figure it out, together, like we said we would. Adrian nodded, his hands shaking as they framed my face. Together. He kissed me, desperate and scared and full of everything we couldn't say. And standing there in the hallway outside his daughter's room, surrounded by the wreckage of our carefully constructed lives, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this destroy us. I wasn't going to let Victoria or the media or anyone else tell me that what Adrian and I had wasn't real. Because it was real. Messier and more complicated than either of us had planned, but real. And I was going to fight for it with everything I had, even if it meant losing everything else. The morning I decided to fight back started like any other terrible morning in the past month. Coffee that tasted like ash. News alerts about the trial on every screen. Sophie asking careful questions she was too young to have to ask. Adrian moving through the house like a ghost, present but not really there, the weight of everything crushing him piece by piece. I watched him across the breakfast table and realized something that should have been obvious from the start. Adrian had spent his entire life controlling things: his career, his daughter's safety, his public image, every variable he could possibly manage. But you couldn't control love. You couldn't control how people saw you, what they believed, whether they chose to trust or condemn. And that lack of control was eating him alive. "I'm going to make a statement," I said. Adrian looked up sharply. "What?" "To the press. On the record. About everything." I set down my coffee cup, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm going to tell them the truth. Lily, we talked about this. The lawyer said—" "I don't care what the lawyers said." I met his eyes. "They're trying to make this about fraud, about transactions, about everything being fake. But it's not fake. Not anymore. Maybe not ever, in the ways that actually matter. And I'm tired of letting other people define our story. If you go public, Victoria's team will crucify you. They're already crucifying me. At least this way I get to speak for myself." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "I'm not asking permission, Adrian. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can support it or not, but I'm done hiding." Something shifted in his expression: surprise, fear, and underneath it all, a flicker of hope. "What are you going to say?" "The truth. All of it." I squeezed his hand. "That, yes, we started with a contract. That, yes, I needed money and you needed a solution. But that somewhere in the middle of pretending, we stopped pretending. And that what we have now, messy and complicated and built on the worst possible foundation, is still the most real thing I've ever felt." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, came around the table, and pulled me into his arms. "You're going to be amazing," he whispered against my hair. "And terrifying. And I love you so much it scares me." "Good," I said. "You should be scared. We both should. That's how you know it matters." I called a press conference for that afternoon. Adrian's publicist tried to talk me out of it. His lawyers threatened to quit. Everyone with an opinion told me this was career suicide and reputation destruction and every other catastrophic outcome they could imagine. But I didn't care anymore. I was done letting fear make my decisions. The room was packed when I walked in. Reporters, cameras, people who'd been waiting for months to see me crack. I took my seat at the table, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly into the camera. "My name is Lily Harper, and I want to tell you a story about the worst decision I ever made that turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." I told them everything. About my mom's cancer, about the bills that were drowning my family, about standing in that ballroom feeling small and desperate and completely out of place. About Adrian's offer, the contract, the money, the clean transaction that promised to solve all my problems without costing anything except my honesty. "I said yes because I was scared," I said, my voice steady even as my hands shook. "I said yes because I didn't see another option. And for a while, that's all it was, a transaction. I played my part, he played his, and we both pretended it was enough. People want to know if our relationship is real," I said. "And the answer is complicated, because it started as a lie, yes. It started as two people using each other to solve problems. But somewhere in the middle of that lie, we found something true. We found each other. And I can't apologize for that, even knowing it started wrong." The reporters were silent now, listening. I could see some of them softening, could see others sharpening their knives. It didn't matter. Dr. Victoria Chen is suing because she believes Adrian Cole is incapable of real emotion, that everything in his life is calculated and controlled. And maybe she's not completely wrong about how he used to be. But people change. People grow. And the man I love now is not the same man who offered me that contract 8 months ago. Just like I'm not the same woman who took it. I leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "So yes, there was a contract. Yes, I was paid. And yes, if you want to call me a gold digger or him a manipulator, you can do that. But you'd be missing the point. Because the real story here isn't about money or fraud or any of the things Victoria's lawyers are claiming. It's about two broken people who found each other in the worst possible way and somehow made it work. It's about choosing love even when it's messy, even when it costs everything." I stood up. "That's all I have to say. Believe what you want, but I know it's true, and I'm done apologizing for it." The room erupted with shouted questions, but I walked out without answering any of them. Adrian was waiting in the hallway, Sophie beside him holding his hand. When he saw me, something in his face just broke open. That was, he couldn't seem to find words. You were reckless, I offered. Stupid, career ending, brave. Sophie let go of his hand and threw her arms around me. You were so brave, Lily. Adrian pulled both of us close, and we stood there in that hallway while chaos erupted around us, holding on to each other like we could stop the world from spinning if we just held tight enough. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Half the internet called me a hero for being honest. The other half called me a dozen things I won't repeat. But something shifted. People started sharing their own stories about relationships that started wrong, about love that came from unexpected places, about choosing to fight for something even when everyone said it was doomed. More importantly, Adrian's colleagues started speaking up. Doctors who'd worked with him for years, who'd seen him transform from the cold, distant surgeon everyone feared to someone who smiled at his daughter's drawings and remembered birthdays and actually seemed happy. Patients who credited him with saving their lives. Even some of the hospital board members who'd suspended him admitted privately that Victoria's lawsuit felt more like revenge than justice. The trial date was set for 3 weeks out. Adrian's lawyers were cautiously optimistic now, said that my statement had changed the narrative enough that they might actually have a chance. But nothing was certain. Victoria was pushing hard, her legal team digging for anything they could use. Whatever happens, Adrian said one night, lying in bed with me tucked against his chest, I want you to know that I don't regret any of this. Not the contract, not the mess, not any of it. Because it brought me you. Even if we lose, even then. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder. I spent so many years thinking that control was the same thing as safety, that if I just planned everything perfectly, calculated every risk, I could protect myself and Sophie from ever getting hurt. But you can't live like that. You can't love like that. No, I agreed. You can't. You taught me that. You taught me that sometimes the best things come from the worst decisions. That love isn't something you control. It's something you choose every day, even when it's hard. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, especially when it's hard. I tilted my head up to look at him. Are you getting soft on me, Dr. Cole? Completely. He smiled and it reached his eyes. It's your fault. I'll take the blame. We made love that night like it was the first time and the last time all at once, desperate and gentle and full of everything we couldn't say. And afterward, lying in the dark, listening to him breathe, I made myself a promise. Whatever happened in that courtroom, whatever verdict came down, I wasn't going to lose this. I wasn't going to lose him. The morning of the trial, Sophie made us both wear matching bracelets she'd crafted from embroidery thread. Purple for me, blue for Adrian, pink for her. So we're connected, she explained seriously, even when we're not together. We'll always be connected, sweetheart, Adrian told her, kneeling down to her level. No matter what happens today. Are you going to win? I hope so. You will. Sophie's confidence was absolute. Because you're the best daddy in the world, and Lily's the best almost stepmom, and love always wins. That's what all the good stories say. If only real life worked like children's stories. But I didn't say that. I just hugged her tight and promised we'd be home for dinner and tried not to think about all the ways that promise might break. The courtroom was packed again. Media, supporters, people who just wanted to watch the spectacle. Victoria sat with her legal team, her expression serene, like she'd already won. Adrian sat beside his lawyer, his hand finding mine under the table and holding tight. The proceedings started with Victoria's team laying out their case again. The contract, the payments, the systematic deception. They called witnesses who testified to Adrian's controlled nature, his tendency to treat relationships as transactions. They brought up his ex-wife, who'd left because she felt like a piece of furniture in his perfect life. They painted a picture of a man incapable of real love, who'd bought a relationship because he couldn't build one honestly. Then it was our turn. Adrian's lawyer called character witnesses, doctors, patients, people who'd seen him change over the past year. They talked about how he smiled more, how he seemed lighter, how the ice around him had thawed. Sophie's teacher testified that she'd never seen the little girl happier or more stable. My mom, still recovering but determined, spoke about how Adrian had not only paid for her treatment but visited her in the hospital, how he'd held my hand through the scary appointments, and never made me feel like I owed him anything beyond honesty. That's not a transaction, she said firmly. That's love. Then Adrian took the stand. He looked calm as he sat down, his hand steady, his voice clear. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when Victoria's lawyer approached. Dr. Cole, you offered Miss Harper $200,000 annually to pose as your fiancée, correct? Yes. And you required her to live in your home, attend events with you, and maintain the appearance of a committed relationship? Yes. So, by your own admission, you purchased a relationship rather than developing one naturally. No. Adrian's voice was firm. I offered a solution to a problem we both had. She needed financial help. I needed to deflect unwanted attention from families trying to arrange marriages. It was mutually beneficial. But it was fake. It started that way, Adrian agreed, but it didn't stay that way. How convenient, Victoria's lawyer smiled. When exactly did this fake relationship become real, Dr. Cole? Was there a specific moment, a contract amendment? There was no amendment, there was just... Adrian paused and his eyes found mine across the courtroom. There was just Lily, being herself, being kind to my daughter, being patient with me, being honest about her fears and hopes and everything in between. And somewhere in the middle of watching her live in my house, I realized I didn't want her there because of a contract. I wanted her there because I loved her. How touching! The lawyer's voice dripped sarcasm. And you expect this court to believe that a man who spent his entire adult life avoiding emotional attachments suddenly fell in love? Just like that? No, not just like that. Adrian leaned forward. It was terrifying. It went against everything I'd built my life around. But that's how I knew it was real, because I didn't choose it. I didn't plan it. I couldn't control it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to. The lawyer tried to shake him, tried to find inconsistencies or admissions that would prove this was all still an act. But Adrian didn't budge. He answered every question with the same steady honesty, never wavering, never hiding behind his usual walls. When it was finally over, when he stepped down from the stand, he looked exhausted, but lighter, like he'd finally said everything he'd been holding inside for months. Then it was my turn again. I'd already testified during the preliminary hearing, but this time was different. This time I wasn't scared. This time I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Miss Harper, Adrian's lawyer started gently, can you describe your relationship with Dr. Cole today? He's my best friend, I said simply. He's the person I want to talk to when something good happens. He's the person I want beside me when things fall apart. He's infuriating and brilliant and scared of feelings and trying so hard to be better than he was. And I love him. Not because he pays for things or because he rescued me from a bad situation, but because of who he is when no one's watching, because of how he loves his daughter, because of how he's learning to love me. And if the contract had never existed, if you'd met under different circumstances? I thought about that. I don't know if we would have met under different circumstances. I was a broke art student. He was a billionaire surgeon. We existed in completely different worlds. The contract brought us together, but what we built after, that was us. That was real. So you don't regret the contract? I regret that we had to lie. I regret that it started dishonestly. But do I regret that it led me to Adrian and Sophie? That it gave my mother a chance to live? That it taught me I was stronger than I thought? I shook my head. No, I don't regret that. The lawyer smiled. No further questions. Victoria's lawyer tried to shake me too, tried to make me admit that I was still motivated by money or security or fear. But I wasn't. I'd walked into this courtroom knowing I might lose everything. The financial support, the house, the life I'd built. And I'd chosen to fight anyway. That wasn't about money. That was about love. The trial lasted 3 more days. Closing arguments, final witnesses, legal maneuvering that made my head spin. But finally, it was over. The judge called for a recess to review everything and make his ruling. How long? I asked Adrian's lawyer. Could be hours, could be days. He gathered his papers. But I feel good about this. I think we have a real chance. Adrian and I went home to wait. Sophie was at a friend's house. We'd kept her away from the worst of the trial, and the house felt too quiet without her. We tried to watch a movie, tried to eat dinner, tried to pretend we weren't both vibrating with anxiety. Whatever happens, I said for the dozenth time, we'll figure it out. I know. Adrian pulled me closer on the couch. I need you to know that even if we lose, even if I lose my position and my reputation and everything else, I don't regret this. I don't regret us. Me neither. We fell asleep like that, tangled together, too scared to let go. The call came the next morning. The judge had made his ruling. We drove to the courthouse in silence, both of us afraid to hope. The courtroom was packed again, everyone waiting for the verdict. Victoria sat on her side, looking confident. We sat on ours, holding hands tight enough to hurt. The judge entered, and everyone stood. When we sat back down, I realized I was holding my breath. After careful review of the evidence and testimony, the judge began, his voice measured and formal. This court finds that while Dr. Cole and Miss Harper did enter into an unconventional arrangement, there is insufficient evidence to support claims of fraud or misconduct. The relationship, regardless of its origins, appears to have evolved into a genuine partnership. Furthermore, Dr. Chen's claims seem motivated more by personal grievance than legitimate concern for institutional integrity. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the rest, but I caught the important parts. Case dismissed. Adrian's suspension lifted. Victoria ordered to pay legal fees. We won. I turned to Adrian, tears streaming down my face, and found him already looking at me with an expression of such pure relief and joy that it took my breath away. "We won," he whispered. "We won," I echoed. The courtroom erupted around us, but we didn't care. Adrian pulled me into his arms and kissed me right there in front of everyone. The media, the lawyers, the judge, still gathering his papers. And for the first time in months, it felt like we could breathe. The aftermath was chaotic but wonderful. News coverage shifted from scandal to redemption story. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from friends and family and strangers who'd followed the trial. Adrian's colleagues welcomed him back with genuine warmth, several admitting they'd never bought Victoria's claims anyway. But the best moment came that evening when we picked up Sophie from her friend's house. "Did you win?" she asked before we even got inside the car. "We won," Adrian confirmed. Sophie whooped and threw herself at both of us. "I knew it! I knew love always wins!" We took her out for ice cream to celebrate. The three of us crammed into a booth at her favorite place, and for the first time in what felt like forever, everything felt right. Not perfect, we still had questions to answer, decisions to make about the future, but right. That night after Sophie went to bed, Adrian and I sat in his study surrounded by legal documents that no longer mattered. "So," he said, pulling out the original contract, "I believe this has served its purpose." I watched as he fed it into the shredder, the paper disappearing into thin strips. "Destroying evidence, Dr. Cole? Destroying a relic of who we used to be." He turned to me, his expression serious. "I don't want contracts between us anymore, Lily. I don't want arrangements or terms or conditions. I just want you, for real this time. No expiration date, no legal protection, just us." "That's terrifying," I said. "I know. There's no guarantee it'll work." "I know that too. We could fail spectacularly. We could." Adrian pulled me into his arms. "Or we could build something amazing. Something that started wrong but ended up exactly right. Something real." I looked up at him, this man who'd offered me a contract and ended up offering me his heart. "I love you, Adrian Cole. Even though you're terrible at feelings and you still try to control things you can't control and you make the worst pancakes. They're not that bad." "They're terrible," I said, laughing, "but I love you anyway." "I love you too." He kissed me softly. "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. Thank you for being worth fighting for." We made plans that night. Real plans, not contractual obligations. We talked about me finishing school, about Adrian cutting back his hours at the hospital to spend more time with Sophie, about maybe expanding our family eventually if that felt right. We talked about getting married for real this time, with Sophie as the flower girl and my parents in the front row and no cameras or contracts or hidden agendas. "Just one thing," Adrian said. "When we do get married, I'm writing my own vows, no lawyers involved." Deal. 6 months later, we stood in a garden behind Adrian's house, our house now, really, surrounded by the people who mattered. Sophie stood beside me in a purple dress that matched her bracelet, holding a basket of flower petals and taking her job very seriously. My mom sat in the front row, healthy and crying happy tears. My dad kept wiping his eyes and pretending he wasn't. Adrian's colleagues were there, my art school friends, Sophie's teacher, even some of the patients whose lives Adrian had saved over the years. It was small and intimate and nothing like the society wedding people probably expected. It was perfect. I, Adrian Cole, he said when it came time for vows, his hands holding mine steady, take you, Lily Harper, to be my wife. Not because a contract says so, not because it makes logical sense, but because I love you. Because you make me want to be braver than I am. Because you saw past all my walls and loved me anyway. Because you're my best friend and my greatest adventure and the best decision I never planned to make. I was crying before he finished, and my own vows came out shaky but honest. I, Lily Harper, take you, Adrian Cole, to be my husband. Because you proved that love can come from the most unexpected places. Because you taught me that being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. Because you gave me a family when I needed one, and a home when I was lost. And because even when this was fake, it felt real. And now that it's real, it feels like everything. We kissed, and Sophie cheered, and everyone applauded. And standing there in that garden, surrounded by love and hope, and the promise of a future we'd chosen freely, I realized something important. Life rarely works out the way you plan. The best things often come from the worst decisions. And sometimes you have to build on a broken foundation to create something strong. Adrian and I had started with a lie. We'd built a relationship on contracts and transactions and all the wrong reasons. But somewhere in the middle of pretending, we'd found something true. We'd found each other. And that was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. Because at the end of the day, love isn't about perfect beginnings or flawless execution. It's about choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. It's about being brave enough to let someone see you, really see you, and trusting that they'll stay anyway. Adrian had taught me that control was an illusion. I taught him that vulnerability was strength. And together, we'd learned that the greatest risk you can take is opening your heart to someone, knowing they might break it. But that risk, that terrifying leap into the unknown, that's where real love lives. In the space between safety and chaos, between logic and faith, between who you were and who you're becoming. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sophie moved in permanently after the wedding. Not that there had been any question. She was ours, as completely as if I'd given birth to her myself. Some nights I'd find Adrian reading to her, the same 3 stories on eternal rotation, and I'd stand in the doorway watching them and feeling grateful for every choice that led me here. My art career took off in unexpected ways. Turned out, surviving a public scandal and coming out the other side made for compelling artist statements. I had my first gallery show 8 months after the wedding, and Adrian bought 3 pieces even though I told him that was cheating. Supporting my wife isn't cheating, he'd argued. It's being smart. You're biased. Completely. He'd grinned. Deal with it. We had fights, of course. Adrian still tried to control things he couldn't control. I still pushed back when he got too clinical, too detached. But we'd learned how to fight fair, how to apologize, how to choose each other even when we were angry. And some nights, when Sophie was asleep and the house was quiet, we'd sit together and remember where we'd started. The gala, the contract, the moment everything changed. Do you ever wish we'd met differently? I asked him once. Adrian thought about it. No, because this is our story. Messy and complicated and built on terrible decisions. But it's ours. And I wouldn't change a single moment. Not even the parts where we almost destroyed each other? Especially those parts. He pulled me closer. Because they taught us how to fight for this. How to choose love when it would have been easier to walk away. He was right. The easy path had never been an option for us. We'd had to fight for every inch of this relationship, had to prove to ourselves and everyone else that what we had was real. And maybe that made it stronger. Maybe that made it last. I hoped so. I believed so. Because love built on truth, even painful truth, had a better foundation than love built on lies. And we learned that lesson the hard way. Years later, when Sophie asked how Adrian and I had really met, we told her the truth. All of it. The contract, the arrangement, the way we'd started as strangers playing roles and ended up as a family. So you guys started fake? She asked, 14 years old and too smart for her own good. We started complicated, Adrian corrected. But you ended up real. Sophie concluded. That's kind of beautiful, actually. Like you guys had to go through all that hard stuff to find each other. Exactly, I said. She grinned. I'm using this for my creative writing assignment. My teacher's going to love it. Adrian and I exchanged a look. Our daughter, the storyteller, already finding meaning in the mess. Just change the names, Adrian said dryly. Obviously, Dad. I'm not an amateur. As I watched her bounce away to work on her assignment, I felt Adrian's arm wrap around my waist. We did okay, he murmured. Didn't we? We did better than okay. I leaned into him. We did real. And that was the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the fairy tale people wanted to hear, but the messy, complicated, beautiful truth. We'd started with a contract designed to keep us separate. We'd built walls and maintained distance and tried so hard to keep feelings out of the equation. But feelings don't follow rules. Love doesn't respect boundaries, and sometimes the best thing you can do is stop fighting it and just surrender. I'd learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when you were scared. It was about choosing someone over and over, through trials and scandals and moments when walking away would be so much easier. It was about building something real from the most unlikely foundation and trusting that it would hold. Adrian had learned that control was an illusion, that the things that mattered most couldn't be managed or predicted or safely contained. He'd learned that letting people in wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing you could do. And together, we'd learned that sometimes the worst decisions lead to the best outcomes. That broken beginnings could create beautiful middles and even better endings. That love wasn't something you planned or orchestrated. It was something you chose, every single day, with all its risks and rewards. Our story didn't follow the rules. It didn't fit neatly into boxes marked romantic or appropriate or how relationships should start. It was messy and ethically complicated and probably a terrible example for anyone looking for relationship advice. But it was ours. It was real. And it was worth every moment of chaos it took to get here. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Not how you start, but who you become. Not the mistakes you make, but how you fix them. Not the contracts you sign, but the promises you choose to keep. Adrian and I had started as strangers bound by paper and signatures. We'd become partners, then friends, then lovers. And finally, we'd become a family. Imperfect and hard-won and more real than anything either of us had planned. And if I could go back to that terrified girl standing in a ballroom, holding a tray of champagne and feeling completely out of place, I'd tell her something important. Take the risk. Sign the contract. Let the billionaire surgeon with ice in his veins and walls around his heart pull you into his complicated world. Because yes, it'll be hard. Yes, you'll question everything. Yes, there will be moments when you wonder if you've made the biggest mistake of your life. But on the other side of all that fear and uncertainty is something worth fighting for. Something real and messy and beautiful. Something that will teach you more about love and courage and who you really are than any safe choice ever could. Take the risk. Say yes. And trust that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely places. That's what I learned. That's what Adrian learned. And that's what we taught each other. In the space between a contract and a commitment, between pretending and being, between who we were and who we became. We learned that love is always a risk, but it's a risk worth taking, every single time.